It was the first leak of top secret documents from the most secretive agency inside the world's most powerful government ever. The first time I started really reading through the documents, I definitely did have a sense of the scope and the breadth of what we had obtained. And so I had a pretty good idea that it was going to make an extremely big impact and would enable a lot of light to be shined on many things that have unjustifiably been hidden from the public for a really long time.
Obviously, there hasn't been a lot of change in terms of domestic law. The U.S. hasn't enacted a bunch of laws imposing upon itself draconian limits about how it can spy. So I think a lot of times when people say, well, what has really changed? They're thinking of that. You know, the NSA is still open, it's still spying. The law that was passed is pretty modest. You could even say trivial in terms of what it changes. But we never thought that that was where the real action is. Governments don't go around imposing huge amounts of limits on their own power. I think the much more significant changes have taken place in terms of individual consciousness. So people now understand the extent to which their privacy is being compromised. They, as a result, can and are taking all kinds of precautions to safeguard the privacy of their own communications by massively increasing their encryption use, which has taken place on every continent. I mean, these companies for years were more than willing to just run roughshod over the privacy rights of their users. They didn't care in the slightest about any of that. They didn't just wake up one day and like develop a conscience and say, oh, I think actually we're wrong and privacy is really important from this ethical or moral or political perspective. What changed was the market incentive, the fact that consumers are now demanding that privacy be safeguarded and refusing to use companies that won't do that. The US and the UK have now essentially launched a PR campaign to accuse Facebook and Google and Apple of being aiders and abettors of terrorist groups, essentially being the best friend of ISIS, of having blood on their hands. These companies are not being bullied by that kind of rhetoric, as damaging as it might be, because they fear, even more than that public relations campaign, a huge exodus of users who are not going to use their services if they're perceived as partners of the NSA and the GCHQ. Well, so I mean, as far as encryption is concerned, obviously that is the key to defeating the surveillance state. And that's going to be the battle that probably is with us for not just years, but decades to come. It's going to be like an arms race. So on the one side, you're going to see government agencies developing technologies to break encryption, to invade communication. And then on the other side, you're going to see private companies and privacy activists and others trying to use math to build a wall of numbers essentially around people's communication and keep the government and non-state actors out. And so the awareness that it's really crucial now, not to just tell individuals go use encryption because that's too complicated, but to have companies implant it, embed it in their products so that it's essentially automatic. So if you're thinking about the biggest companies, we're talking about Google and Facebook and Apple, are now probably the most powerful companies in the world, more powerful than oil companies or defense contractors. They have more money than those industries. They exert more power. And their core business is collecting data. It's not like it's ancillary to their business. You know, like people think of Google as a search company that just sort of along the way collects data. No, Google provides search capacities so that you use it so that it can collect data about you, whether that's to monetize it or sell it, or more importantly, to analyze it so that they can understand how the human brain works, so that they can develop artificial intelligence products and the like, which they see as the future. So I don't see a way, although it would be great if it could be done, I don't see a plausible way, given that these companies are really more powerful than governments now, to curb the willingness and ability of these companies to collect data.
So the fact that he has ended up not in US custody, not in prison, and most importantly of all, completely free to participate in the debate that he triggered around the world, has been immensely positive for him, and I think for every citizen concerned about these issues. And not only does he participate in these debates, he has become an extremely desired speaker. So he gives speeches, he participates in events, he writes columns, he does interviews, he has large platforms. And so, as he's talked about before, he's able to make a living, a good living actually.
I mean, I'm not sure that there is a way to avoid using these companies short of removing yourself from the matrix altogether. Interestingly, when I met with Edward Snowden in Hong Kong and kept pressing him on his motive for why he was willing to risk his liberty or even his life to bring this information to the public, that's essentially what he said, is that, especially someone his age who came of age already in the world of the internet, it's not this kind of ancillary technology that you can sort of choose to use or not use the way maybe if you're older you think of it as. It's the window into which you interact with the world. It's unavoidable. And so to see that, he said, compromised and turned into a tool of oppression and coercion and control, as opposed to this device of this innovation of liberation and democratization, was just so disturbing to him that he couldn't, in good faith, in good conscience, let that happen. So I don't think that there are ways to avoid these technologies. I think that what individual citizens can do is apply various pressure points to make sure that they can do so safely without having their privacy compromised.